You know that feeling when you find that perfect sample after you've been digging through an endless number of samples for hours? You know what loop you want to use, how you want to chop it, what instruments you're going to add, what beat you're going to put underneath it, and it's going to sound absolutely perfect. Yeah, that's rare. That hardly ever happens to me either. But it does happen every once in a while, and the more often you flip samples, the better you're going to get at it. So I'm going to share some of my tips and tricks on how to take a sample and make it your own by adding new elements, but also making it sound authentic. So stick with me and let's hop on into Ableton. Okay, so this is the sample that I found, and I already have it taken down to semitones, but it's at 122 for the original, which is pretty fast for a boom bap type beat, but I'm going to try and use that to my advantage. So this is the section that I kind of want to hone in on. Normally I would do, when I don't really know exactly what I want to do, is put it into a simpler, chop it up, and then play some MIDI notes and see what sounds good. But for this one, I actually kind of hear in my head what I wanted to do already. So for me, this is just a quicker way to do it if I already have an idea. So I'm going to take this section that I want to work with, and I always like to keep the original intact. So what I'm going to do is hold Control, drag this down to the next audio track that I have here. Let's just go ahead and start cutting and splicing this audio together. So I want this to repeat a second time. And then there's a higher note, I think this one, that I want to put in here and kind of change the rhythm a little bit. So again, I'm just going to hold Control, copy this, and let's take it here. And let's just copy this over one more time. And I think that's pretty much the loop that I want for now. So we have all of these clicks that we can hear whenever we're splicing these together. And quickest way to fix that is to just grab this fade here. And if you pull it back this way, you can kind of fashion a little crossfade. So we're getting rid of those. Let me just do all of those real quick. Once you're happy with how it's sounding, just so we don't have all of these breaks in the audio, what I like to do is just kind of shift, select all of these, and then hit Control J. And that's just going to consolidate it. So now it's all one piece here. All right, now the next thing I want to do is I want to slow it down. So let's see if we take this down. You can kind of have some trouble if you're trying to make like less of a vintage sound and make it sound clean if you're trying to change the BPM this much. But I'm going to use this to my advantage because I'm making more of a lo-fi track. So I'm going to change the warp to complex. I'll clean it up a little bit. Okay, so let's go ahead and make this sound even just a little bit grittier. So I have a glue compressor on here already, just reducing some of these peaks a little bit. And then let's go ahead and add an EQ. I'm going to cut out a little bit of the rumble of that bass, but I'm actually just going to use the bass in the sample because I think it's going to come through pretty well. I do want to add just a little bit more grit to this, so I'm going to grab a drum bus and we'll just add a little bit of that crunch. And that's going to really just dirty it up a little bit. So the next thing I want to do is start adding some instruments to kind of complement this sample. So listening to this, there is a lot of guitar. It's very guitar heavy. I think maybe an electric piano would sound nice. It would also kind of sound in character with kind of the vibe that we're going for. And I'm also hearing like some pizzicato strings, like an orchestra in the background. So let's keep those in mind, and I'm going to start with an electric piano. So I'm going to go ahead and use this Dreamy Time Pad patch from Arturia. And if you have no idea where to figure out the key or like what chords to play along with this, we can always throw on a tuner or even a spectrum analyzer. And if we just listen to the sample, this tuner is mainly picking up the bass notes, which is kind of a good start. You can kind of figure out what scale these notes would be in. And you can also use this spectrum analyzer. Right here, it'll show you the notes that are being played. So if we just look at this first chord that's happening. So yeah, just like the tuner was saying, there's an E. We've got another E here. Let's look at some of the harmonics here to get a better idea of what's happening. We have a B. There is another E. We've got a G sharp. So in my mind, I'm thinking maybe E, because E, G sharp B, or G sharp minor, could be either of those. So that's kind of a good place to start to get an idea if you have no idea where to start figuring out how to play along with your sample. And after the magic of MIDI editing, this is what the piano chords look like. So basically what you saw me playing were kind of the basic triads. I was adding a little bit of a top line melody, but this is basically the same chords I was playing. The only thing I really did with all of these was took the third of the chord. So this is what you saw me playing, and I'm basically taking the third down an octave. So I've done that with all of these. All right, I'm really happy with those chords and how they sound. It's just this piano sounds too pretty. So we need to kind of get it a little bit grimy and dirty, just like our sample. Okay, so let's run through the effects chain I made for this piano real quick. So I just started with an EQ8 to get out any of the lows and kind of damp the highs. I've got this Gorilla Drive, which is a really cool distortion plugin from Safari Pedals. And you could, of course, use Ableton Saturator or Drum Bus to do something similar. I just really like the way this one sounded on this track. I'm using the chorus ensemble to give it a little bit of stereo width. Another EQ8, just to cut a couple of these harsher frequencies in the middle. A little bit of compression. Hybrid reverb to give it a little bit of space. And then I am using Soothe too, because this was still kind of harsh, just in this mid-range area. And even with adding all of that kind of grit and distortion to the piano, it's still kind of hard to hear. So I wanted to add something a little more percussive. So I added this kind of mallet sound, Star Ocean from Analog Lab. Just kind of gives it a little bit of a percussive trancing at the beginning to help that piano stand out. So before I add any more instruments, I want to go ahead and get a beat going. So let's start with some drums. I had this hi-hat loop, and this is actually two different hi-hat loops that I spliced together, and then I put some processing on them after I consolidated it so they sound similar. And I'm not going to go through all of the processing I'm going to do for the drums on this one, because I have a whole video that I'm going to go through my favorite Ableton native effects for getting these nice crunchy boom bap or lo-fi drums. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my push and record in some drums. Okay, so the last melodic thing I want to add before I start thinking about arranging is those pizzicato strings that I mentioned kind of at the beginning, because I can hear those playing in the sample, but they're kind of getting chopped out partway, and they're not coming through as well since we kind of slowed down the sample so much. So I want to add those in to make it sound like they're kind of part of the original sample. And so I'm using the Short Pizzicato String Quartet by Spitfire Audio, and this comes with Ableton Suite. I'm not sure if it comes with any of the other versions of Ableton Live, but I know if you have Suite, you can download this in the pack section down here. And it sounds really nice as is, but again, it's kind of fading into the background here since everything is kind of distorted and saturated at this point. So I'm going to go ahead and add this saturation, EQ to kind of cut out the lower end and boost those highs, some overdrive, and just some auto pan to get it going back and forth. And I think that pretty much is going to do it for the instruments. So let's go ahead and think about arranging. All right, so this is the arrangement I came up with. Pretty much I have that main sample, which I have conveniently titled main sample. And that plays throughout the whole beat except for that one B section that we have here in the middle. I have some vocals that I found off of Splice. They just sound Really, really nice. And I chopped it up here and pitched them down a little bit to go along with the sample. And it's honestly even a little off key from the sample, but I think it sounds pretty cool and it kind of goes with the vibe. Hi-hats are basically the same. You'll notice here, just to give it a little bit more energy after this drops into the main section, I double timed them. And just really easy way to do that is just take your sample and then you can hit the divide 2. I think it's divide 2. Yeah. I always get them confused because math, I don't know. I added this little section here with the piano for the intro. So just kind of some chord sweeps up and down. And again, that's just layered with the mallet. We've got those same strings that come in and out throughout the song. Some vinyl crackle down here just for a little bit of that extra ambience. And the only other thing I added was this vocal sample, again off of Splice.
Please leave a message after the tone.
And I have that set to kind of, you see I have everything drop out right before it hits the main section here, except for that vinyl, which I should take out. And then I just pitched this so it's actually in pitch with the rest of the song. So I will go ahead and play everything for you. And if you enjoyed, please remember, like, subscribe, and let me know what you want to see in future videos, and I can work on it. Until then, take care, and I'll see you in the next video.